Thank you all for being here. Really excited to have you see this talk. This is one of the ones I'm looking forward to the most. Rob and Chris are pulling off an absolutely amazing digital and agile transformation at ANZ. And I think what I love about it most is they're dealing with both the organizational and the cultural barriers, as well as some of the technical things that you just need to get right. So without further ado, please help me in welcoming Rob and Chris.
Thanks. So think of this question. What would you do if the CEO or president of your company came up to you and she said, any 3-year strategy I put in place I know is going to be wrong in 3 years. I just know it with 100% certainty. The market's moving too fast. Everything's changing. Everything's shifting too fast. So any multi-year strategy we do today is going to be not only a little off, but completely off in 2 to 3 years. So what would you do? So this is the question the CEO of ANZ, Shane Elliott, asked me a little over 2 years ago at this point. So the first thing that came to my mind was, well, you're exactly right. You're a smart person. You're the CEO. Let's just get rid of the 3-year strategy. It's outdated. It's not useful anymore. But quickly, you're thinking through your head going, well, no, that doesn't make sense, because if you're going to lead the industry, if you're going to be a market leader and not a follower, you have to be thinking 2 to 3 years out. You need to be thinking about your strategy and constantly planning for that. If you don't, you're just looking a month or two in front of you, and that's not going to lead to good results. So that's out of the question. You can't just get rid of it. So the next thing that pops into my head is, well, great, we'll just change that strategy every quarter. We'll start to look at our strategy. We'll start to adapt it. We'll start to change it every quarter, every 6 weeks as the market changes. But this reminded me a little bit of my 16-year-old son, this strategy, where he's got great ideas. He never stops. He's always got ideas how he's going to turn himself into Tony Stark and make millions of dollars. But I usually let him know that those ideas aren't going to execute themselves from the couch while he's playing Xbox. If you don't have an execution capability to match the speed of your strategy, it's also useless. It's just as useless as not having the strategy in the first place. So the trick, the answer that we decided to embark on at ANZ a little over 2 years ago was we needed to be able to have that long-term view, but we also needed to be able to be constantly changing our group strategy and having that translate into products that our customers got very quickly. And so we had to change the way we worked. We had to change the entire structure of the bank to do that. So that's what we're going to talk to you today about, is our journey, how we've done that, how we've used a lot of the Atlassian products actually to help enable that. So I'm Rob. I lead the transformation to our new ways of working at ANZ.
And I'm Chris Kimbler, product owner for Jira and Confluence service at the bank.
And so, one of the things is, the tanker gets a really bad rap. Usually we talk about the tanker, we say, oh, it's slow. Tankers are slow and outdated, and we have to go faster. Well, ANZ is a 180-year-old company. We've got 40,000 employees. We've got a market capitalization of around 81 billion, and we've got $1 trillion in assets. So we are a tanker. We are absolutely a tanker. But there's nothing wrong with a tanker. Tankers are also pretty good. They provide stability. You kind of know where they're going. You know where they're heading, and they don't move too fast. But that last piece about not moving too fast, we do need to be able to move with the agility of a speedboat. So we're not trying to forget that we're a tanker and become a speedboat. We're trying to bring the two together, and we think it can be done. We absolutely think it can be done after 2 years of going at this. But it really requires you to kind of fundamentally change the way you organize yourselves to do that. So we had quite a catalyst for change. Just to set some quick context, the Australian banking industry is going through a bit what the UK did a few years ago. We've got open banking regulations. We've got new digital banks. So the regulations are changing to allow digital banks in. We've got a whole new set of competitors, new fintech startups. We've got Alibaba coming into the market. We've got Apple, Amazon. We've also got a lot of new partners, Apple, Amazon, Alibaba, the fintechs, right? So there's no black and white answer anymore. It's even hard to define who your competitor is and who your partner is. So, and we've just got the customer expectations, most importantly, that are changing rapidly on what they expect from a bank, especially in Australia, which is a highly digital banking environment when you look at the country. So what did we do? How did we change? Well, we've completely changed the organization. We've taken close to 9,000 people now and effectively completely changed the way they work. We made them all reapply for their roles. We've turned the organization upside down. We'll talk more about that. We've kind of flipped everything on its head and said that we need to change ourselves quite dramatically to be able to execute differently and be able to keep up with that pace. So how did we start the transformation? Well, the transformation, and this is a lesson I learned, and it really hasn't changed from when I worked at Anderson Consulting back in the early 90s. To do any major transformation, you have to transform people, technology, and process. You have to do all three. It's not a let's choose the top one or let's choose the top two. If your organization isn't transforming all three of these, you're not going to get that hockey stick uplift in speed, in customer centricity and focus. So we've really flattened our organization. We've really changed the way we operate. I'll come back and talk a bit more about that in a few slides. That's been really critical to our transformation, is keeping people at the center of it, because it's the people that actually go ahead and change the process. It's the people that change the technology. So you have to change all three. But we made a conscious decision to start with our people, to start with our organizational changes, because we were, again, well aware that it's the people that change the technology, the people that change the process. If you don't get that right, you're not going to be able to sustain any potential quick wins you might get by going after the other two. They're usually going to unravel themselves because the organizational muscle is going to pull you right back to where you started from. The technology, I'm not going to focus on this as much in this talk today. But we've really been investing heavily in what we generically call paved roads, our CI/CD pipelines, our automation, our push into the cloud. We're trying to take significant amounts of our material workload, which is what our regulator defines as customer-driven data workloads, and move them into the cloud. So we are very cloud focused right now. But in addition to cloud, just simply enabling our squads to be more autonomous and spend less time trying to get the product to the customer and decrease that feedback loop has been critical for us. And then process. We have changed over 1,000 processes in the bank in the past 2 years. And I'm not referring to our business line processes, which are changing too, like applying for a loan. I'm talking about how we interact with legal, how we interact with risk, how we interact amongst ourselves, how we interact in fund projects through finance. That's a massive piece there. Changing how a company as large as ANZ thinks about and funds work has been a major part of our transformation, a major part of the process changes we've had to implement. So I talked about this new way of working earlier, so let me try to define what it actually is and drill down a few layers here into what it is and how we're actually thinking of it. So when we talk about new ways of working, we really took a step back. Before we said we want to transform to agile, be it capital A agile, so SAFe or Scrum or all the different methodologies. We said we want to achieve three things as a company. We want to focus really the entire company on three objectives. One is speed to value for our customers. There's a lot wrapped up in that. It's not just about speed. It's about delivering customer value, which also comes along with how do you define customer value, and then how do you measure it, and then how do you increase speed. So speed to value for our customers. Employee engagement comes back to the people. It's really about the people. So we've done a lot to support and change how we work as teams within the organization. And again, I'll come back to that. And the third one is simplification, right? So if we are focused on, this is almost a byproduct of the first two. If we're focused on our customer, we know that the products we have, we're a bank. Banks are typically very product-driven organizations. If you just think of the way we're structured around products, basically. So we've changed that. We've tipped that on its head. And we think that'll lead to a simplification of our products, and that will ultimately lead to a simplification of our technology. So this all sounds nice, but how do we operationalize this? This is where it starts to get interesting. How do we actually turn this into something which is, yep, you've seen this everywhere. Customer drives our strategy. Strategy drives our planning, which drives our execution. That's nice, but how did we actually operationalize it? So we have taken our strategy, and we've used the OKR framework to express our strategy. And for those of you who haven't used the OKR framework, and it stands for Objectives and Key Results, it's really challenging. It really challenges you because it focuses, again, on that word I keep using, value, and it focuses on putting key results in place that you need to measure. So as you have these discussions at the highest level, at the group strategy level, it really changes the conversation and makes it really focus you on your customer and the value you're delivering to your customers. We then translate and link all those OKRs at our group level, at our group level, down into themes and features. And so those themes and features effectively become our portfolio management. We don't have projects anymore at the bank. We don't have programs. We've gotten rid of all that. We've blown up all that legacy project, portfolio, PMO. It's all gone. Our OKRs translate into our themes and features, which are then broken down further down into epics and stories, which is really, if you remember the blue there, that's what we consider our execution. So really our themes and features are now our portfolio view of the world, which directly goes down into the epics and stories that the squads execute. So we're using Jira and Confluence to drive that whole cycle. And we're really actually quite excited about the acquisition of Agile Craft and the Jira Align, because that's really going to help us. We've been pushing the limits of what we can do with Jira and Confluence in terms of linking those higher level OKRs and themes and features down to our epics and stories. And that Jira Align is really, really interesting to us, and we might start piloting that in the next month or so. But we're using them to house our OKRs, our features, themes, our epics and stories. And then we've got our CI/CD pipelines, which again, I said I'm not focusing as much on, which helps us to get that in the hands of the customer. Because again, if it's good to have that framework, but if you can't expedite how quickly you can get it into the hands of your customer, then you're just slowing that feedback loop down. It's once we figured this out that we took a step back and said, how do we want to reorganize ourselves? So we didn't start with, again, let's go agile. We didn't start with an organization in mind. We started with thinking about the world this way, about defining those three core things that we were going to focus on. And now you can see how this lines up with our new organization. And I've got one more slide, which will go into a little more detail to see that. So the ExCo is our executive committee. It's our management board. It's where our CEO and the heads of the divisions sit. They own the strategy. They set the OKRs for the group. That then leads to our portfolios. And don't think of this as a portfolio of projects. This is a portfolio of people. This is our new organizational construct. So we've moved to a capacity-based model. So a portfolio in our Australia retail would be home ownership, for instance. That's actually quite a bit broader than it used to be. It used to be something like home lending. Now it's home ownership, so we can build that whole ecosystem. That would be a portfolio. That portfolio has a single portfolio leader, and it's made up of tribes and squads. So we use the Spotify model for those of you familiar with it. So we use chapters, tribes, and squads. Those tribes and squads are there to execute against essentially the epics and stories. They also own some of the features as well. So if you look at then how we're structured, how we changed ourselves, we've now taken 9,000 people I mentioned in the beginning into this model. That's our entire Australia retail product group and all of technology, and we're starting to roll it out to other divisions in the bank. And by the way, when we did that, I mentioned it earlier briefly, we completely took a look at the entire organization, including myself, including everybody, had to reapply for their roles. And we looked for culture fit, and we looked for job fit. Culture fit being the most important. You know, people who were very successful in the old model, the very command and control model, they didn't get roles in the new organization. We had the opposite as well. We had people who looked at this and said, you guys are nuts. I don't want to work at a company like this. I made my career off of you know, possibly, again, that command and control. And so they opted out of the model, and we were fine with that both ways. So we shifted the shape of the organization a lot. We went from 35% engineers up to about 60% engineers. We were able to do that largely on the back of the fact that we eliminated a lot of the coordination and management. We don't have PMs. Chris will talk a little bit more about that. We don't have PMs in the model. We're really using, this is where you'll see in a bit here when we go into what we're doing with Jira and Confluence, we're really using Jira and Confluence to help the teams be able to manage things like dependencies and the priorities themselves directly. So we've been able to eliminate all kinds of layers of management. Now, that has been quite a journey for us to go through. We found at first it was quite stressful on our teams because we don't have all the processes in place yet. Again, if you think back to that concept of putting the people in place to help change the process and change the technologies, one of the lessons learned was that was really stressful on our people, especially in that initial transition, because we still had a lot of our old processes, we still to this day have a lot of our old technology. We're not you know, all wonderful automated pipelines. And what we found was that the people in the model really went for it, and our productivity really didn't take a dip, but it was quite tough on them initially. And we've pulled out of that. So it's just one of those things we had to pull out of. But we definitely think we've pulled out of it, but it was a tough initial, say, 9 months as we transitioned. And if you look at that, you can see how flat the organization is. That's really the layers of the organization. So we have our executive committee. The CEO would be there, then our executive committee. We have our portfolio leads, our tribe leads, and then we have squads. By the way, I didn't mention it yet. I meant to mention it a couple times. This is completely business and tech integrated. You don't see tech up here. You don't see business. If you look at our squads, we're completely integrated. So we have our engineers, our analysts, our journey experts would be from the business. Our product owners are typically, you know, kind of business resources. But there's no separate product management group that sits in, say, our Australia retail anymore. It's just gone. Everything is in tribes and squads. All business and tech resources are all combined. So I'm going to hand it over to Chris for a bit, and he's going to dive a bit more into some of the stuff we're doing with Team of Teams and what we're doing with Jira and Confluence.
Thanks very much, Rob. Okay, so effectively what this slide here is demonstrating is there were two key shifts. We shifted from a focus on products to a focus on services. And really that's born about the fact that we're obsessed in everything we do being focused around the customer outcome, simplicity, and also shortening the cycle time from strategy to delivery. And also making sure, given it's a bank and the concept of the tanker, that it's secure, well managed and stable. We've also shifted from a project-based delivery model to a capacity-based model. And what that means is we've transformed from having a large department of project managers wearing pinstripe suits, doing command and control governance, delivery controls, to an agile and a nimble capacity-based model. Our experience of using Jira and Confluence in this unique way for Team of Teams at scale enables the progression and increased cadence. We've gone from a tanker to a speedboat with the speed at which data can be visualised and decisions can be made. And that's gone from previous cases of months, if not years, to weeks now. There are also a number of stories of customer value that have been shipped within weeks that it would have taken months, if not years, to previously deliver through this construct. There have been user cases delivered in weeks for new digital virtual assistants, end-to-end functional process and platform switching changes. And this is really showing that this change on a massive scale for 9,000 people across 900 squads working across 6+ geographies is really gaining traction. I'd like to now share a short video with you that we produced and released that connects the why with the how for the 9,000 people that are involved in this construct Rob ran through a little bit earlier, to generate a sense of curiosity with the folk and to engender a sense of incentivisation and excitement about creating and receiving stories through digital mechanisms.
Hi, if you're new to MWell, you've probably heard of Jira, but you might not be 100% sure about what it is. This short video will give you an overview of how Jira can help to manage and visualise your work. You've probably seen the sprint walls set up around our offices, and you might be wondering where Jira fits in. It's obvious that Jira is great for squads who work across multiple geographies. They can use it to collaborate in real time. But what about if your team is co-located? How can Jira help you? Well, while Jira is an online version of a physical sprint wall, it's actually much more than that. Jira lets you see in real time when tasks are started and finished. This might help your squad to work more effectively. Jira pairs perfectly with Confluence, a tool that allows your team to have online conversations about what you're working on. Jira lets you see exactly how the smaller parts of your work are tracking to achieve your larger goal, and this might help your squad to stay on track. Updating your backlog and sprint planning is a breeze on Jira. No more rewriting your user stories over and over. Jira captures information so we can measure how we're tracking at portfolio or domain level against our features and our themes. You can use Jira to stay on top of your risk management. Risk can't slip through the cracks when they're digitised. Jira lets ANZ capture and maintain data for auditing so we can protect our banking licence. These are just some of the ways that squads, tribes and portfolios use Jira to help them deliver customer value faster. Jira is not a one-size-fits-all tool. Talk to your squad and your squad coach about how you might be able to use it to help you. So now that you know a little bit about Jira and why you might want to use it, let's talk about some of the things you need to know to get started. First up, let's talk terminology. In Jira, we talk about portfolios and tribes, but don't let that confuse you. Domain and tech areas can be used interchangeably. If we look at work from a portfolio level, we're chunking work in themes. At the tribe level, we're working on features. At a squad level, we break our work down into even more manageable tasks. We call these stories. Across ANZ, our sprint cycles are 1 to 3 weeks. It's really up to your squad or tribe to find the right sprint cycle that makes sense for what you're working on. Once you've decided on your squad sprint cycle, your next step is to choose from 2 different types of squad boards in Jira. Don't worry, you don't need to make that choice on your own. Your squad coach can guide you through it. At a high level, if you're working in a sprint cycle of 1 to 3 weeks, then a Scrum board might work best for you. It allows you to break down your work into smaller chunks and commit to delivering it in a certain time frame. If you don't work within a typical sprint cycle, for example, you work in a call centre or retail branch, but you still want an easy way to visually track all tasks your team is currently working on, a Kanban board will do the trick. As well as squad boards, tribe performance leads and portfolio leads will be using boards at those levels to help them manage prioritisation and tracking.
Okay, so basically the video runs a little bit longer internally, but I'll spare you the remainder. But hopefully you get the gist of effectively the size and the scale and the amount of employees that we're touching with this particular change and need to communicate the message to as it relates to building awareness through not only videos but also quick reference guides using Confluence, FAQ portals using Confluence and whatnot. Okay, into the enablement of insights. So effectively, our people, squad members, want to use Jira and Confluence to create their content. The value proposition for them is around squad autonomy, and that effectively gives them a handful of simple guardrails as it relates to enablement of transparency and the digitisation of ceremonies. And they're constantly using the product now as an enablement mechanism, whether that's for daily sprint planning, quarterly planning, retrospectives and whatnot. It's integral to the day-to-day operation. Prioritisation. Our product owners in particular are using Jira to capture information related to grooming small pieces of work and prioritising that work at the story level. and visualisation and providing the link to stories that are prioritised from epics through PI planning. Then there's the visualisation benefits. And visualisation and what this pattern enables is both a breadth and a depth. So our people, leaders and squad members, are using Jira and Confluence to get a depth of information and detail in a timely sense and fashion. So historically in the past, with projects and steering committees, it quite often would take a number of months for information and decisions to reach upwards. But through the simple guardrails of openness and transparency and access to the Jira boards to anyone, we have an agility and a nimbleness and a visualisation into depth of information. And our leaders, having timely access to the leading indicators, are enabled to influence strategy quickly and promote nimble responses for delivery of customer value, portfolio rebalancing, risk management. Now, this has not all been easy, and there have been some areas of lessons learnt along the way. So through our initial MVP, we found that through mandating the solution and locking fields down in a heavy way with mandatory fields and whatnot was not in the interests of the staff autonomy and squad autonomy that I referred to earlier. So we've got a simple set of guardrails where we're not mandating the solution and effectively using the quick reference guides, the video that was shared earlier, as a mechanism for educating and providing awareness rather than locking down and making it tightly prescriptive. We've also had learnings and ongoing learnings around data quality. As our users of the volume of employees Rob and I have touched upon go through their awareness and maturity curve, the opportunities for the improvement in data quality, in particular taking into account we don't have a lot of mandatory and lockdown fields, is an ongoing opportunity for us and a journey that we're continuing through. The third opportunity and lesson learnt through this has been around performance. We have had a significant change in use case for the platform, where previously it was a choice in an old project management investment slate delivery model, where it was a choice to run Jira and Confluence, to a construct now whereby it's effectively integral to the way those 9,000 employees are working on a daily basis through their squad ceremonies and the delivery of customer value. And the supporting of users through the maturity curve, through their unaware, aware, productive and mature, is quite a considerable investment as it relates to education and learning, but certainly what we're finding a very worthwhile investment that is then also heightening the performance expectations as our users become more and more mature in the use of the Jira and Confluence products. So moving on to the next slide, what this slide shows you, using those simple guardrails that I referred to earlier, there's been an empowerment of users by keeping things as simple as possible for them. Applying rules and restrictions only when necessary, with very few mandatory fields, provides a tooling which supports the Agile Manifesto and the values principally around individuals and interactions over processes and tools. And what this slide is showing is an openness and depth, so view access to all, who the story is assigned to, the release the story is attached to, the feature the story and epic are contributing to, and the breadth through horizontal scaling of stories contributing to epics across the enterprise. And that's quite significant when you take into context the combination of the technology and business resource that Rob referred to earlier, as well as the delivery outputs of customer value across 900 plus squads for 9,000 employees. So it's at fairly significant scale. The tooling underpins the process. It doesn't drive the process. The thing we're most proud of is that the pattern provides for the entry of information using a multi-directional mechanism for linking the work all squads do with the organisation's strategic objective. And what I mean by that is we haven't locked the pattern down from a perspective of saying, well, no stuff only flows top down from OKRs through strategy, etc. Whereby it's actually bi-directional, so it does actually work in both ways. So sure, out of OKRs, quarterly investment reviews and quarterly board reviews and PI planning, there is the generation of that information at the feature, theme and epic level down into story. But also, this use case also allows for bottom-up. So if squads are being the recipients of certain requirements and needs, they are actually able to create stories and push those up into epics, etc., for visualisation at the enterprise level, for visibility as per the prior slide, and decisions and pivoting as necessary. Now, the slide I have up in front of you actually shows how we're aggregating squad level information agnostically, top down or bottom up, to enable visualisation for scheduling, linking work to the strategic themes, progress to commitments, capacity, cumulative effort, and also further insights to know your squads, their capacity and their performance parameters in team of teams at scale. And just to extend upon a point Rob made earlier in terms of our excitement with regard to the Jira Align announcement, based on the size and scale that we're operating within, the opportunities currently through the use of portfolio and also potentially Jira Align to see dependency visualisation, to see risk management dashboards are quite essential, because we have a paradigm whereby within those constructs that they can operate at multiple levels across the organisation. So the opportunities there are quite exciting, and we're really looking forward to evaluating and MVPing some of those features in coming time. Okay, thank you. Back to Rob.
So a couple of the most powerful things we've learned from this are one, our squads and the people in the squads, they've got to want to use the product. A little bit of that video was trying to, because these are business tech combined squads, we've had to go out there and show the value of actually using Jira, using Confluence to manage your stories and your day-to-day work. We've seen really good reception. We've got not universal, so we've got pockets of it. We've got still some in the coaching community are still saying, oh no, we want to do it all up on boards and then enter it in later. We're really trying to go digital first. What we've seen though is once you start to get there, at our scale, what we can pull off that data now is just, it's actually just stunning. Actually, we're used to operating in an environment where project managers would come in and they would determine the RAG status just based on what their boss said it needed to be that day, and that's where you get Dom referred earlier in one of the presentations earlier to the watermelon. That doesn't happen anymore. At least we can see the green shoots where that's not going to happen for us anymore. We're actually looking at the data of the stories that are going on, but looking at it across the whole bank. So it's no more somebody's opinion on where we are, and also we don't have the fights between technology and business where we're coming together saying, well, I think the status is this, and a business project manager is saying, oh, I think the status is this, it's your fault, etc. We're now just looking at it, dealing with it as it comes, but we can roll that up, and I think what we're really starting to see the power in is when you're doing this at scale is being able to roll that up to actually help drive your strategy and help drive your portfolio and get that cycle going. We think that we can see in some of the groups that have kind of fully adopted the model that we're shortening the cycle of set a strategy, put a program in place. The program is going to have projects. The projects are going to literally run for years at the bank. And so the strategy changes, and then those projects, they just keep living on, right? They typically keep going because people's careers are based on them, et cetera, and it's really hard to stop. We've seen, by throwing all that out, we've seen us able to shift our strategy at our group level, actually have impacts on the stories that we're executing within 4 to 6 weeks. That's just a dramatic shift for us. We don't see it everywhere. We've got a long way to go, but there's a lot of excitement at ANZ because we can see the path we're on to basically go strategy to story in, say, a 4-week 4 to 6 week time frame. There are faster loops, by the way, that are happening within that. I'm talking about changing kind of the strategy at a divisional level. Within that, of course, you've got the almost bi-weekly sprint feedback loops that are still there, that are happening within the tribes and squads. So those are still there. So putting a product out, A/B testing it, getting customer feedback, changing the product, that loop is happening as well. But this broader loop of actually impacting our strategy is where the light bulbs are starting to go off, and we're starting to see that if we get people wanting to use the products to track their stories, we can, with very little resources now, do things that we needed teams and teams of PMOs to do in the past. And oh, by the way, it's far more accurate because it's based on the actual work, not all the opinions and politics that get in the way of trying to set project statuses and project updates, et cetera. So it's been a really powerful change. We've really continued to look to leverage Atlassian products to actually make this whole cycle possible, because again, without the tooling in there, we really couldn't make this all work, and we really don't see any other tools on the market that could help us at this kind of full scale and breadth. So I mean, the other thing to note is not every company is going to be able to do this. We've had CEO support really 2 years ago where he said, we're going to blow up bureaucracy and change this. And that's been wonderful to be the transformation lead at a company that has that kind of support. I've talked to dozens and dozens of other companies trying this, and there are pockets where they have that support, but a lot of times it comes bottom up. But you can still take a lot of lessons away from the stuff that we're doing here, I think, across the board. And so anyways, that's our story, a bit of it. We're going to kind of close it there, but Chris and I will be around if anybody has any questions. You want to go into more depth, feel free to stop by and chat us up. Thanks.